Welcome to the Leadership Journal with your hosts, Nick Helgett and Robby Woodard,
where we cover our journey, struggles, and obstacles that we have overcome, and moments in our careers that have led to growth. Here on Table Talk each week, where we break down various topics and journals of our trials and tribulations.
All right, welcome back to the Leadership Journal for part 2 of our segment on leadership styles. I'm your host, Nick Helgett, with my co-hosts Jed Stoltz and Robby Woodard. Where we left off with servant leadership, and we covered transformational leadership, transactional leadership, and servant leadership, and kind of how each one of those things go hand in hand. We're going to move on to defining 4 more, and we'll start off with autocratic leadership.
Can I make one quick statement before we move on to autocratic leadership? Excuse me. I feel like I may have misspoken a little bit in the last segment talking about servant leadership, and I made a comment that some employees may try to take advantage of your leadership style to their own ends, and I think what I meant to say was more along the lines of some people may not have the full picture in mind, and as a servant leader, when you're trying to take roadblocks away, help make their jobs easier, give them the tools they need, that there's potential for somebody to ask for tools or ask for a change that may impact other people in their network negatively because they're not thinking about the whole impact that change would make. And if you're not careful, don't ask the right questions and get all that information, you may accidentally end up giving feedback to somebody or proposing a change that won't be viewed well by your leadership or peers, or feedback may not be received well by somebody else because they see it differently based on their position. And I think that's a pretty normal thing, but I think that was more along the lines of what I meant to communicate rather than to insinuate that our team members are intentionally doing the wrong thing, but rather unintentionally not thinking about the big picture and how those things may affect upstream or downstream people. Just want to clarify that thought process.
I like the reflection on that, Jed, and definitely I agree with everything you said there, because it's really about helping the team see the bigger picture and then learning with them and growing with them. And then now as we dig into the next 2, they kind of go hand in hand. One is an extreme of the other when you really look at it, because autocratic definition, or the autocratic leadership styles definition, is a centralized decision-making style where the leader maintains significant control over the team in setting the tone, making sure that everything is clear, concise, direct. There's not a lot of input from the team, and there's very much quick decisions made by the leader. Whereas on the other side of the spectrum, the other way, the democratic leader, you encourage participation and input from your team in the decision-making process. So there's a 100% flip in how much the team is incentivized to collaborate, to be open to communication, and valuing their feedback in the decision-making process.
Go ahead, Jim.
I was going to say, I think as with everything that we've talked about so far, there's pros and cons to both. The first one that comes to mind is emergency situations or crisis situations. Unfortunately, we do live in a time where it seems like there's a higher incident of crisis situations than there have been in the past. Civil unrest, unfortunately, things like active shooter situations, workplace violence in general, but also weather patterns, things like that are disruptive to the workplace. And it's really beneficial in an emergency situation to have one person who is responsible for managing that situation, for directing others to places or actions that need to be taken, and not waste precious moments that could mean somebody's life quibbling over the details. And I think in a situation like that, where you are responsible for directing somebody in a life or death situation, you're the right person for that role, autocratic leadership is probably beneficial.
Mm-hmm. The key word that I kind of hone in on on that definition is centralized, and I want to pose an opposing view to it, just a kind of a different way to look at it is the idea of decentralized command, and where you're setting up a structure where you have centralized command on every level, so you have people that have a full understanding of their decision rights at that level and can lead in these certain centralized situations. And I think that's key to having a strong structure in your organization, is to have people understand have a clear understanding of their decision rights, but at times they need to know when it's time to step back and let centralized command kind of in those specific situations you're talking about, like emergency preparedness and those types of things, where you have to have somebody directing traffic.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
But that opposing viewpoint of having that decentralized command and getting away from having the one person above all, type leadership.
Well, yeah, and we've been talking about pros and cons, right? The big con of autocratic leadership is that one person doesn't know it all. They're not equipped. No one person is equipped to handle absolutely everything that's going to happen on a team or in a business by themselves all the time. You need to have leaders at all these levels to help handle situations as they arise, because there's no one person has that bandwidth.
Well, and when I think about like autocratic leadership and you're calling out emergency situations and specific needs, I'm thinking about like organizations that come in, let's say you're working in a store, there's the ADA, there's the FDA, there's maybe the EPA for certain things. Like when I was in charge of the food departments, I would get oftentimes visits from the FDA or like the food department for the state. They were coming in and looking at certain things, and it has to be very set in stone, has to follow certain processes. And if you don't follow these processes, you could, in result, be shut down, because there's no way to get away from these decisions that you haven't set. Someone else is telling you how it has to happen. And I think when we look at stuff like that, that's ultimately where this style really fits.
Yeah.
Is things that you can't move on. You have to be cold stone set, or you can get in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. Another one that kind of comes to mind is at my current place of employment, we have team members who are actually trained as firefighters, because we work in an environment where fires are a very real part of our reality, unfortunately. And so we have a fire truck on site that belongs to the company, and trained firefighters with all the gear, right, who are able to respond immediately to a fire incident. And in that situation, right, there's always one person who is the incident commander, and that person's responsibility is to tell you where to go and what to do to make sure that everybody is operating in the right places to attack this fire, get it put out, and mitigate the risk that it is that is posing to the company and to the people as quickly and effectively as possible. And that's a situation where even though some of these people report directly to me as far as corporate chain of command, right, I'm not the person they should be looking to for advice about how to put out a fire. I have no firefighter training. No. I don't know what I'm doing. And so I need to have that person, right? What I should say, sorry, let me back up a little bit. That is to say that they shouldn't come to me. Nobody should come to me, and I should not be part of this decision-making process. If they say, how do you think we should fight that fire? Let's do this democratically. I'm going to tell them, I think you need to stop asking me and go do what you're trained to do, because I don't know anything about how to fight a fire this way, right? I can't contribute. Asking my opinion, it will bring nothing to the team. It's just going to slow them down. And I think that's specifically why, what comes to mind when I think of an autocratic leadership style in a crisis event, and where it's beneficial to centralize that command structure, because you don't necessarily want to be asking everybody's opinion about a situation like that who is not qualified to weigh in on this situation.
Mm-hmm.
versus a democratic leadership style that encourages participation and input from team members in their decision making. Right? It's collaborative, there's open communication, and you value team feedback. Those are all really positive things for a lot of day-to-day activities or big changes that might be coming, where you want to get everyone's opinion. You want to understand how this is going to impact them, what's going to work best for them, what's going to work best for the company. You want diversity in opinion and thought, and you can take your time to get that and consider all those options.
Yeah. Like when I was going to school to be a filmmaker, one of the things that I think about when I think about democratic leadership, there's key people put in place. There's a director, there's the director of photography, there's the audio engineers that are in charge, there's the gaffing team. They all have their specific things that they do, that they provide input on the set and specific functions. They collaborate, they work together. And then ultimately, it's all about the actor's performance. And then there's no real way to dictate or guide that. It's all about working as a team to get that result. You can't just have you're going to talk like this, talk like this, talk like this. You can't dictate how a person's going to say a certain word 100% or how they're going to convey emotions. That needs to be open for interpretation for them to be able to be successful. And like if we carry that to working in a store, where you're setting displays, you're putting out merchandise, you're helping reset stuff. You've got a free counter to work with for clearance because the season's changed. Give that person the ability to decide on how that's going to look, because they are going to 100% want to sell that merchandise. And if you take that away from them, they lose the motivation. They lose the ability to be successful.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I feel like, just from my own experience, and I said in our last segment that I tend to lean into that servant leadership. Democratic leadership kind of goes hand in hand with that, because I'm constantly asking for my team's input and opinions on different decisions that we need to make as a team, and how we're going to either perform our day-to-day or achieve a certain goal, those types of things. So I think it's really important to make sure that their input is valued, whether we do it or not, whether we go with it or not, that they are valued in that way.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's an anecdote I recall reading in, and I apologize, I cannot remember the name of the leadership book off the top of my head. Somebody listening may, and if you do, feel free to let us know. But I remember reading an anecdote in a leadership book about a woman whose leader would bring everybody in the team into a conference room when there was a decision to be made, and go around the table and give everyone a few minutes to say what they needed to say, to give their opinion, to give their ideas, with the clear understanding that at the end of the day, that decision was that leader's to make, and that your decision may not be the one, your idea may not be the one that they go with today, but it's important that everybody feels heard and has the opportunity to say what they want to say and get their ideas out there.
And I guarantee their input still influenced a decision in a certain aspect.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Whether they see it or not in that moment.
Absolutely.
That's where it's the leader's job to kind of know their team and know the temperature, and be able to come back and speak to some of the whys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%. And that kind of takes us into laissez-faire leadership. It's this hands-off approach where leaders, they provide a little bit of guidance, but they allow the team members to make the decisions. There's a lot of autonomy. The team's capabilities have a high amount of trust placed into them. There's very minimal amounts of direct supervision. So think about like working at an advertising company, or working in an environment where you have an idea, don't know the end result because you just have a tiny briefing to go through. Like, I'm going to school to be a graphic designer. Companies ask for a specific thing, but they don't know what that's going to look like. So it's up to the marketing team to figure out through trial and error, through the iteration process, what that's going to look like. And you can't just say, nope, has to be black, has to have this amount of text, has to look like this, because you don't know what that looks like unless you try it out, you build it out, and you have the ability to be creative in that environment.
it makes me think of a leader that Jed and I both worked for at our previous company. He wasn't necessarily liked by all. For this,
which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
No,
most leaders aren't.
No. Yeah. But I guess my point is the environment that he created of allowing us to take responsibility and have certain decision rights in most situations allowed Jed and I both to flourish. We honed our skills in that job, by basically cutting our own teeth. We were implementing strategies to achieve our goals, and no one was stopping us because
there was nobody there to stop us.
Yeah, we had the motivation to do the best job that we could, and the skies were the limits, until we ran into a couple, hey, you can't do that because that's against the law. Oh crap!
Yeah,
nothing like illegal except for it was
a policy
or a policy
or company policy or something along those lines.
So we definitely, but we had the freedom to push those boundaries and to find out what we could and couldn't do without fear of repercussion in a negative way, and we were heavily
not that there wasn't accountability.
Correct, but we were heavily encouraged to continue to push to be better. And we really flourished in that environment. But that environment's not for everyone.
Yeah, and it's really hard to build that environment because it takes the right people with the right skill set to say, okay, you know what you got to do, go for it.
Yeah, I think for me, laissez-faire leadership is sort of an extreme of the first style that we talked about of transformational leadership, where whereas in transformational leadership, you inspire and motivate people to exceed their own self-interest for the good of the organization, fostering environments of creativity, right? You're a visionary, you're inspirational. To me, laissez-faire leadership is that next step. You're not just creating an environment where people get to experiment on their own and learn and grow, make their own mistakes, but you're almost handing the reins over to them for large periods of time while you work on other things. Or at least that was my experience with a leader who definitely had this style of leadership.
Yeah.
And like Nick said, we had a lot of freedom to make our own decisions, to set our own strategies, to plan our day, and it worked really well for us, and it helped us grow a lot, and I think prepare us for our leadership roles, because we had become de facto leaders on the team because we knew the why behind what we did, and we were motivated to continue to push that boundary and to improve. However, right, it requires a lot of trust in your team and their capabilities. And when you're not connected to the team, you may not have the visibility on where those gaps are, and it can make it really difficult to have accountability, unfortunately. So you may have a handful of performers who are aligned with the goals and want to push those boundaries so they can take that next step and make the team even better, make the business even better. But you'll also have people who aren't self-motivated to that same degree, who need somebody to be maybe more transactional or more hands-on in their transformational styles of leadership to keep them engaged in a way that will enable them to add value and positively contribute to the team. Without that, they find it difficult to positively engage in the work that the team is supposed to be doing. And that also, when there's not that accountability for others on the team, that will also tend to drive out your high performers, the people who do want the team to be successful and can't stomach working side by side with somebody who doesn't and is allowed to get away with not performing on that same level or working towards performing on a higher level than they're already on. You'll unfortunately, the wrong the laissez-faire leadership to the wrong degree can drive away talent just as easily as it can allow high performing individuals to flourish and to make significant positive contributions. Autonomy cuts both ways, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's that line between giving too much creative space and then not enough creative space. You want to see what your team can do. You want to watch them flourish. You want to watch them grow. But then you have to be able to check in, double check that what you were asking them to do is being accomplished.
Right.
Because ultimately, everyone hates to hear this. You're here to do a job. You need to make sure you get some kind of result, not just paid to do nothing.
Absolutely. And I think, to use your example earlier of graphic design, right? To me, laissez-faire very much speaks of the idea that I looked at your resume, I did your interview, and I hired you to do this job, so do it. Why do I need to babysit you through this process? And especially when you're hiring an outside contractor, that's often the case, right? We set the expectation at the beginning, we set the tone at the beginning. I have other things to do in my role, and so I need you to do your job on the timeline within the budget that we agreed on. However, I would also say that it's important for the project manager who is responsible for that contractor and the work that they're going to provide to check in with that person from time to time and make sure they're, and vice versa, right? So like a graphic designer might say, hey, here's a rough draft of what I put together. What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? What do you want me to change? And then take that back to the drawing board and try again, make some adjustments. And maybe they don't get good feedback from the customer, and that's a whole nother, I guess, animal.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like to think that an effective laissez-faire system, both parties are engaged with each other at least a little bit, as kind of temperature checks. And when you don't have those temperature checks to make sure that we're all still generally going the right direction, then it causes a lot of problems.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at like autocratic leadership where you have strict set guidelines, this is what needs to happen, this is how we're going to do it. You got democratic where you've got the team is involved in 100% decision making, or almost 100% decision making, to help them feel like they're making decisions, they're making an impact, they're helping push stuff in the right direction. And then you have they're making all the decisions, you're just checking in with them, you're just touching base, you're in charge, but you're letting them have the reins and the ability to prove their abilities in the laissez-faire. So like there's 3 different extremes here with these 3 different leadership styles.
Yeah. And without those temperature checks, how do you know that you're still aligned as a group, as a leader or manager responsible? Again, to continue with like the graphic design, you hire somebody to create a logo. It would, in my mind, it wouldn't be smart to wait 8-9 weeks for a logo to be delivered and then just take whatever they give you and present it to your boss as this is our new logo, right? And then get mad at the contractor because you didn't like what they provided. You have to check in with them and make sure that what they're doing, the progress they're making, is aligned with what you hired them to do from time to time. And unfortunately, it's so easy when you have other responsibilities to miss that step and start to lose alignment across your team.
Mm-hmm.
And often, in my experience, in varying degrees, some people will be well aligned, some people will be a little bit less aligned, and some people may not even know who you are, unfortunately. And that for your team is the biggest problem when they're not even aligned amongst themselves about the direction they should be going in, because they don't have sufficient direction even to be aligned as a group. That's a huge problem.
Anything to add?
Not really. I've kind of said my piece as far as that section goes. But situational leadership, it's reigning for me as the most recent in my journey, and that's being able to adapt my, different leadership styles. so when I've, as I've mentioned previously, I have leaned heavily into servant leadership. So being able to adapt to different situations, and change my message or change how I'm trying to manage my team is not the easiest for me, and it's definitely an area of opportunity of growth that I'm working on. And the key definition is adapting your leadership style based on the situation and the needs of the team. And I just had a very recent situation where I was trying to address a cancerous negativity that's going on our within our department. And so I had to change my message while still giving my team trust and reassuring them that I know what their capabilities are, but delivering those results to show the rest of the department that here's the example that everybody needs to operate by. And that was probably one of the most difficult conversations I've ever had.
Why? Because
relationships and trust are built over time and are taken away and can be taken away so easily. I know I've already said that, but the idea that you, because every leader has their own insecurities. We're human, right? The idea that if I change up what I've been doing over the last 2 years, am I going to lose that connection with my team? Am I going to lose their respect? Am I going to lose their motivation? Or is it going to result? Am I not going to get the results I'm looking for? Are those results going to go completely the other direction and it backfires on me? Like all those things of fear of losing that connection, because for me, connections with people is very important. I thrive on it. I want to have that level of trust.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea of losing that is terrifying.
And I can see where that would be very difficult, because you have to not only take the different inputs of your team that's coming into you, have to ingest all of it, but then you have to take and swing with every situation. So every situation is going to be different. Every response will be different. Every day is going to be different.
Yep.
And you can take some similarities from previous occurrences, but you have to then kind of adjust to severities, different aspects, and be so flexible that you may challenge yourself in different ways.
Yeah.
If I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah, it definitely, the cool thing is I did change my message. I did deliver, a pretty stern message to my team of things, of how we need to be different. And almost everyone on my team stopped by my office and said, that really needed to be said. Thank you. Thank you for getting us back on track. And I was not expecting that. I was not expecting that at all. So it's one of those very relieving moments of, okay, I did the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Reassuring moments.
Confirmation.
Yeah. And and then with a couple team members, it felt a little closer connection. Like, all right, we're now on the same page, and I feel like we're on the same page now. I felt like there was a gap, and I think we just closed it. Awesome. Let's go crush it.
Right?
Yeah. I think to me, situational leadership sort of brings together in a really neat, tidy way a lot of what we've kind of been talking about these last couple episodes, which is the pros and cons of each unique style, and that there is not necessarily any one way which always works.
Yeah.
And that isn't to say that I don't think most of us probably have our base leadership style that we kind of default to as a general, everything's normal. This is kind of how I lead my team most days.
Yeah.
Right. And for me, I think my base leadership style is kind of somewhere in between, or maybe a mixture of transformational, servant, and democratic, kind of right in all those three categories. I want to create visibility for my team on what's going on in the business. I don't care if you're the lowest laborer on the floor or if you're the highest person in this line of progression who's been here for 25 or 30 years. It's important to me that there's an understanding of the why and the what and the how, because they deserve that. I mean, you're talking about people who spend a third of their life in this building doing something for someone else, right? I mean, they get a paycheck out of it, but they're not the main beneficiaries of this money being made off this product, right? It's going to other people and other places. And there is an owner of this company that has, quite a bit more wealth than anybody else involved in this whole process. And so it's only fair that they understand why we're doing what we're doing, how it affects them, and how they can operate within it. And I want them to take that information and be inspired and do better and want to do better, want to improve, want to take that next step. But I also know that to do that, I have to be in front of them, taking things out of their way. I can't just tell them, here's the metrics, go make it better. I also know that I have to be there to advocate for them, to other leaders, to help with process changes or help them understand the systems better, grow their capabilities, so they're in a place where they can take that next step. And I also want to understand what they're seeing, what their thoughts on what we're doing are, and so we can adjust accordingly when they have ideas or thoughts that are better than what I had, which, happens pretty regularly. These guys have been here a long time, a lot of them, and they have got a pretty thorough understanding of how these things have worked in the past, what has worked, what hasn't worked. They've seen a lot that I haven't seen in this industry. And I rely on them heavily to help me understand what I need to know to make these processes. So, I would say on a day-to-day, those are kind of my default leadership styles, a mixture of those things. But like we talked about earlier, there's a time for autocratic leadership, maybe not by me directly, but on my team, and maybe someday me, right? There may be an emergency where the fire brigade is not the incident commander, but I'm the incident commander. There's times for me to just kind of let the team run and do what they do and take the training wheels off. And there's times where I need to be involved in the tasks that they're doing to make sure that we're aligned on what those tasks should be in order to help them get where they need to go. And I think that the situational leadership really, really illustrates that there is no perfect way to do it. Mm-hmm. It varies from person to person, from situation to situation, and it's important. There are pros, there are benefits to being adaptable and to changing what you're doing as different things arise.
Well, like when you said it beautifully, like adaptability, flexibility, every situation is different. Have to be able to adjust your leadership style daily so that it kind of matches what's happening, what's going on in the environment. When I look at transformational leadership, I think about what Simon Sinek said with the Infinite Game. The companies that look at being better than who they were the previous day, wanting healthy competition, wanting stuff to be able to compete with, so they know what they can have room for growth on and to be able to adapt and change. Yeah. And that's what I really look at every day is like, who was I yesterday? How was my team yesterday? Who's our direct competition? What other team is boosting us up, and how do we continue to boost them up? But then also be in direct competition and then show that we can be better than who we were to really boost that forward. And when I pair that with my thought processes around servant leadership, and then like the culture taking that, boosting the team to want to be better, and then inspiring and motivating them to take those challenges forward. So it's not just my vision, it's their vision. Because if I can have all the dreams in the world, but if I'm not sharing with my team, I'm not effectively leading them through what they want to see. They have passions, they have drivers, they have motivations to do better. How can I unlock that? How can I push us forward? And then when I look at, like Nick had said, and I appreciate that, the data-driven side, the performance side, the really driving in on KPIs, having those conversations with everybody to know where there can be improvement, what the culture looks like, how could we take those two things and then be better and then really push forward. Having that situational awareness, having that adaptability and that flexibility to go with the flow in the real world, as I like to call it, is important for success.
Yeah. And your point about KPIs, really connecting how what they do every day is affecting those things, right? And I have told my team, probably till they're sick of hearing it, right, that I go over these things with them, because I don't want them to think that I am sitting in my office all day doing whatever I do, and then I come down, we have a team meeting, and now I'm just hounding them. Oh, these are all things that we suck at. These are all things we need to do better at. And I'm just nitpicking. Every week we have a team meeting, and I'm nitpicking some other thing that's just what he does. He comes down here and tells us the things that are wrong. And I don't only do that. We talk a lot about things that are going well and a lot about positives, but I also don't want them to think I'm just being nitpicky. Well, the policy says you're supposed to do this way, and so now it's what we're going to do. I'm going to come down here and remind everyone, you got to follow the policy. But rather, like, you look at these numbers and see how, like, look at these things we're succeeding in, and look at these things where maybe compared to other teams we're not as successful. And let's talk about what we're doing that's feeding into this top number, and the things that we're doing we could do a little bit differently, or that if we went back to basics on some tasks that would influence the numbers we're not quite number one in, that are really like that low-hanging fruit. Let's just take care of these little things that we talk about in meetings. If we can just strengthen that up a little bit, these will get better. Mm-hmm. And that is why I talk about them in meetings. Not because I'm a perfectionist, not because I just want to enforce my will or want to tell you guys what to do, but like, this is how the decisions that you guys make and the work that you do is actually changing the face of the business. And I think it's important for them to see that. Otherwise, I'm concerned it's just, here's your boss coming down to, nitpick your job all day and tell you what to do. And that's not the case at all. I tell you guys these things and we have these conversations because I believe that we can close that gap, and I want to help you do it.
Yeah. And if you're an hourly person that is looking to make that move into leadership, I think it's really, excuse me, I think it's really important to, understand these definitions and then start breaking down things in your workplace and where, okay, I see where this definition fits here. And so you can really start seeing the real world application for yourself and understand like how as at your level, how you can implement some of these strategies and some of these ideas into your day-to-day and how you lead your peers. And because being a peer leader is in a lot of ways a stronger position than your direct supervisor. You have more influence over your peers than possibly your supervisor does, because you've gone golfing with Pete over here, and Sam's kids, I've seen them and gone to 3 of their birthdays, and yada, you've invested time in these people. And when people see you step up and genuinely care about them and everybody's success, people start becoming very receptive of it. You're always going to have your naysayers, but you're going to find out who your key players are to help you all be successful and take yourself and your team to the next level. And then of course start breaking down your direct supervisor and their styles, and so you can understand what makes them tick a little bit better. And maybe you can, if you have that safe environment where you can say, hey, I learned this about leadership. Have you ever thought about applying this principle to your day-to-day? What do you think about that? And start having those leadership conversations, because that's going to cue into your direct supervisor that this person's interested and wants to grow.
Yeah. And I would add, I think similarly at the end of the last episode, I kind of had a call out to listeners who are interested in getting into leadership, who are listening to this podcast, try to figure out how they can grow and become leaders, whether by position or activity. And I think, like Nick said, starting as a peer leader, influencing your peers it's huge. If you can positively influence people over whom you have no authority, when you get to a position where you do technically have authority, you're going to find your job is so much easier, because it's so much more effective to lead people through leadership tactics or leadership styles than it is to just come in and say, I am your boss, you will do what I say.
Yep.
And, we've talked about a couple times in the show, there is a time and a place where you have to do that, but it should always be the absolute last resort in any case. And if you can learn how to influence people positively and lead people when you don't have that fear of an authority figure or to have to throw your weight or title around to make change, then you can lead in any situation where you do have authority without having to utilize it all the time.
Yep.
And that's major. That's major.
Yeah, and I really love that, because when you think about like what you and I had talked about in the Three Worlds conversation, the real world, the personal world, and then the leadership world, there are going to be a lot of times where, as a on the floor peer leader, your boss is not present, your leader, your supervisor is not present because they're tied up in the third world, or they're out the floor because they have things that they have to handle. If you can step up, if you have that desire to take that next piece, that next push into being a leader, this is your time to shine. Because if the floor can be maintained, if everything can happen with you guiding a one piece here or two pieces here or something, and your leader has peace of mind knowing that you have that control, or that ability to lead it, they're more focused on how to better develop the team and to invest more time in you, because you've taken something off their plate. You've made their job easier. And I think that's ultimately what leadership is about, is making people's lives easier, impacting them positively, and having a lot of benefits that people don't really get to see because they're not tangible. They're physical. And it's over time, the investments really start to appear through improvements, through growth, through transformation, with the right leaders in place.
And the last thing I want to say about it, to make sure, if you are going to step up as that peer leader and try and influence the people you work with, remember, it's not always what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. So I have made the mistake as a peer leader of coming in too strong, and all of a sudden I have lost credibility with my peers. So tailoring your message, understanding your how people operate, understanding what they find important, and not just getting to a point where you're dismissing their opinions because you want to step up and be a leader. Because remember, as a leader, it's not about you. It's more about the people that you're are in your care.
Yeah, it's about the team.
It's about the team, and so don't lose sight of that.
Taking care of the people in your charge, because you've been charged with responsibility for them.
Yep.
Would it be inappropriate to make a book recommendation?
Go for it.
Do it.
Okay. I talked about leading without authority, and I didn't come up with that term on my own. So if you are a leader who's looking to learn how to change your leadership style so that you don't have to rely on your title or your name or your position, or if you're looking to get into leadership or become a peer leader and you're not really sure how to get that process started, I would encourage you to go look for Leading Without Authority by Keith Ferrazzi. It's an excellent book about exactly that, how to break down silos, transform teams, and reinvent collaboration. So I would encourage you to go look for that. It's not a very long read. It's 250 pages, give or take. It's a really interesting read, and there's a lot in that book that can be applied at any level of leadership, title or not, that is really, really helpful for helping build successful teams, helping transform teams. So, yeah, I would encourage anyone who's interested in learning more about that concept, Leading Without Authority, pick up the book by the same name.
I'm gonna pick up the book myself.
It's also available as an audiobook for people who prefer that.
Hey, there we go. All right. Any closing thoughts?
Man, leadership is a journey, and I've definitely had my ups and downs, but it is probably the most rewarding career choice that I've made. So it's not for the faint of heart. Always be a student. Always be a student. Always never stop learning. Be a student of leadership, and never lose focus of your development.
Well said. No, I 100% agree. The minute we stop learning is the minute we become dumb, and none of us want that. Another fun little anecdote I've heard before is leaders are readers, which is to illustrate the same point, right? Continue to grow, continue to seek out the best knowledge, people with experience that you can learn from, and just keep pushing forward. We're going to make mistakes, we're going to fail, and we're going to learn from those mistakes, and we're going to do better.
I'm gonna definitely echo what both of them have said. Leadership is a journey. I started off, like we talked about in episode 0, very rocky, very green. I've had my ups, I've had my downs. It is the most rewarding thing that I've ever done in my life. You touch a lot of people's lives. You touch a lot of influence. You meet a lot of people, and you learn from everybody about how people want to react, how people want to talk, how people want to be. And you don't get that at the level you do as a peer leader. You get glimpses, but being in this spot, you see so much more. It is difficult. Never going to sugarcoat that. It is a very tough spot to be in. But if you're motivated, if you're driven, if you're passionate about people and helping them succeed, you'll be a great leader. And I want everyone to remember those words. It's not about how successful you are as a contributor. It's about how successful you are as leading the team through results and through situations.
Love it. Well, thank you again for tuning in. And I guess that's it for us.
Thank you for tuning in for another episode of Leadership Journal, everybody, here on Table Talk. And have a wonderful day. Tune in for our next episodes. And catch you on the next one.
Thank you.